Elsewhere in Southern Africa, is Zimbabwe ready for its next presidential election? Let's turn to our anchor at large, Ndimyake Mwakalyelye, for some details. Hello, Ndimi.
Well, thank you, Vincent. Zimbabweans head to the polls on July 31st in what is being described as a very critical election and a test of its commitment to democracy. In less than 2 weeks, one of these two men could be elected president of Zimbabwe following a 5-year co-sharing agreement resulting from a violent and disputed 2008 election that left citizens shaken to the core. If he wins, this will be President Robert Mugabe's 8th re-election, but for Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai, his first, making him the only other person to lead the country since its independence 33 years ago. Analysts pondered over the country's future after the election at an event hosted by the Voice of America. Freedom House's Sub-Saharan Africa Director, Vukamin Petrovic, is not optimistic the elections will be credible.
Voters' role is again in shambles. Registration process was not correctly done. And I would say most importantly, reforms that were supposed to be implemented, that were supposed to result in free and fair elections, are missing.
But educator Priscilla Ndlovu from Zimbabwe says key to the country's future is how Zimbabweans choose their next leader.
When we look at leaders, we don't look at leaders and see which leader has the best qualities to lead the country. The first thing that we do is we look at where do they come from. And then whoever they are, it comes next. And because we have 84% of the population as one tribe, I am telling you, it's most likely that after this election, we're going to have what happened last time, because they choose tribe first. And the other 16%, they don't matter.
If Kenya, where political rivals too formed a unity government following a disputed and violent election before holding elections, is anything to go by, Lauren Plock of Congressional Research Service says Zimbabwe has reason to hope.
If Prime Minister Tsvangirai wins this election and the security sector respects that election and you have a transition, there are certain things that can change immediately. They can do a pretty quick repeal of or amendment to POSA and AIPA and the criminal law. And then, of course, you've got the Constitution as a basis, and it changes some things that will take a long time. Devolution is a long process, as Kenya is now learning. 5 candidates are contesting for the presidential seat with the hopes of unseating President Robert Mugabe, but many eyes are focused on Mr. Tsvangirai, whose party gave ZANU-PF one of its most contested elections in years. The party's USA Youth Chairman, Admonish Deda, says Tsvangirai will be a different president from Mugabe.
Mugabe is focused on his populist message of trying to more appease people, the people that fought for liberation. He feels that ZANU-PF has a God-given right to reality, eternity. Morgan Tsvangirai is about a different message altogether. He is about bringing development to the people of Zimbabwe.
Now, for more perspective on the election, I'm joined now by journalist Sandra Nyaira from VOA's Zimbabwe service. Sandra, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ndimi, for having me.
Well, you were at the discussion yesterday. Let's first of all talk about what the Freedom House director said, at least Sub-Saharan Director for Africa, Mr. Petrovic, that there's no way the elections can be free and fair because of the few points that he raised.
He's basically raising the issue that most of the people in Zimbabwe have been talking about. When I say most, I'm looking at NGOs and I'm looking at the MDC and all the other opposition political parties that have essentially been saying, in the absence of what they call democratic reforms, these are reforms to do with the media, access to media, what the media says on air, what the media publishes, and also in particular looking at the state broadcaster in itself, that's the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. The MDC thinks had that been done, that would have probably created what they would have said, a better, given them a better footing in terms of where they stand in terms of the elections. And they've also been talking about security sector reforms. Basically, they're arguing that in the absence of security sector reform, there would not be a free and fair election because the MDC and the other political parties in the country, they think that the military is in control of the whole, electoral machinery in Zimbabwe. So looking at those issues and other, we look at laws like AIPA, Access to Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We look at POSA, which restricts the way people meet in Zimbabwe in terms of, like during election time, that we can't have a meeting, 4 of us, without, getting clearance from the police. So what basically they are saying is that in the absence of those reforms, there won't be a free and fair election in Zimbabwe. But ZANU-PF and those on the other side tend to think otherwise. They will ask you, when you say security sector reform, they will say, what do you mean by security sector reform? Are you talking about changing the figureheads, the people who head the army, or are you talking about real, changes? So it depends with where you are and who you stand with. So, but basically what, many in Zimbabwe, in terms of the NGO community, in terms of the opposition, they're saying, without those changes, crucially to those laws, POSA, IPA, the Broadcasting Services Act and all, there won't be a free and fair election.
What about the challenge that Mr. Tsvangirai poses for Mr. Mugabe? Is that a strong possibility that he could prevail?
There is a very, very strong possibility. When you look at the numbers, the problem in Zimbabwe is that numbers could be deceiving. The people who are going out to attend the rallies that are being called star rallies by ZANU-PF and the MDC, humongous rallies. You've got thousands and thousands of people going to attend. But the main question is, are those people registered? The challenge comes when it comes to taking those people to the voting to the voting booth. Are they going to, to go and vote? Or are they just coming to enjoy the atmosphere of those rallies, getting their freebies, their T-shirts, their caps, and other party regalia?
Is that to do with the voter registration that Petrovic alluded to?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Yes, the voter registration exercise is an issue that many have been talking about, that there are many people who were left out of that exercise, who could not, eligible voters, who could not, but human beings on the day
sometimes
off. we want to do things last minute. And then there's also the issue of not
we'll have to have you back to tell us more about that. You know how the nature of TV is fast and quick. Thank you so much, Sandra Nyaira,
Thank you for having
Zimbabwe
me.
Service. Back to you, Vincent.
Yes, you always need more time with Sandra. Thanks a lot, Ndimyake. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com.